Are you tired of every time you hit someone when you spar or box, they laugh at you and think it's funny? Well, this video is for you. I'm going to talk about all the elements that go into becoming a better puncher, a power puncher, and maybe even unlocking your ability to knock somebody out. This is Coach Keith Keppner. This is going to be a long video, but this video is only for people that are going to be disciplined. They're going to be committed. They're not just going to take this information, listen to it one time and not do it. If you take this information, you listen to it, you understand it, get the concepts. By the way, at the end of the video, I'm going to give you actionable training advice that you can plug into your training and use that I promise you, done over enough time, which means just a couple months or less, but within a couple months, you will definitely see a dramatic increase in your power, all right? And what your punches do to other people. I've done this with multiple people. They have literally gone from being powder puff punchers to being solid punchers that are hurting people that are bigger than them, all right? And like we all know in sparring, the goal isn't always to hurt people, but for those of us that compete or want to compete, you do want to be able to have some sting to your punches, and you want to have punches that are going to make people at the very least respect you and have to be concerned with your punches. If not, have punches that can actually get someone out of there. We're going to talk about all the elements of that. So let's jump right into it. There's a big question, right? Are punchers born or are punchers made? Well, I can say that, and anyone who's been around boxing can say that there's people that walk through the doors of the gym and they hit hard. They hit pretty freaking hard. And there's guys that walk through the doors of the gym and they don't hit very hard. There's a difference there. So there are definitely natural punchers. I know this one guy I had that built him up from scratch, and now he's having a successful pro career. First time he sparred, he dropped somebody just because that's how much power he had in his hands just naturally. But if you're not someone that's just born with it, maybe you can hit relatively hard, not so soft that people laugh at you, but it's not really creating the effect you want on your opponent, then this video is for you. And you, I promise, can increase your power, because I've done this so many times with guys, and I've experienced it with myself. When I first started boxing, I wasn't a weak puncher, but I wasn't that strong of a puncher. Over time, I got more powerful. My dad told me early on when I started training, hey, you know, in a few years, you'll actually be hitting harder than you're hitting right now. And I was like, really? Because I'll be bigger? He's like, no, because your ability and your proficiency of movement and technique will be better. Now, can someone that is not a hard puncher become a Mike Tyson or a Deontay Wilder level power puncher or Gervonta Davis? Perhaps not. Perhaps not. But at the very least, I can promise you, you have not actualized your potential as a hard hitter, and doing what we're going to talk about is going to do that, all right? So get ready, buckle up. Let's talk about first the approach. You can do all the mechanics correct. You can do all the things we're going to talk about as far as how to move the body in a fashion to increase power. And I've had this happen with people I've trained, where you're telling them to do this, do that, do this, do that, and all of the moves, and they're doing the moves, but they are not hitting hard. Now you could stop and say, oh, well, they weren't born to hit hard. Well, I don't think that's true. What the difference is the intention. And you've probably heard people talk about, like, I remember one way that it was first told to me was how people like Kevin Rooney and Casamano talked about throwing punches with mean intentions, right? Mean intentions. And that is what you need to do. Now, let's be clear. Mean intentions is not anger. It's not frustration, right? There's a difference there. It's really interesting, because being mean with your punch is different than being angry with your punch, and it's different than being frustrated with your punch. Maybe over tension when you're angry, or over tension when you're frustrated. When you're mean, you can be relaxed and be mean, right? But it has that edge to it, if that makes sense. But you want to throw those punches with mean intentions, the intentions to hurt somebody, but not because of rage right? Because then that's uncontrolled, and that will actually inhibit. And that's, of course, one of the biggest fallacies of people when they start boxing, right? And I'm sure you guys have heard this that have been around for a little bit. Someone says, oh, well, if I had to, if I got mad enough, I could knock you out or beat you up or whatever, right? And as anyone that has done any type of combat sport knows, that's not the case, right? You do have to have some fight in you. You do have to be a fighter, which is being aggressive, right? And that can actually, sometimes in certain situations, beat someone that is more skilled, that is not as aggressive. But at the end of the day, it is a skills-based sport. And if you're just raging and completely seeing red and not focused, you're not going to be able to deliver the blows that you need to deliver in the fashion you need to, like we're going to talk about. And then also there'll be extra tension there that is going to not only tire you out, but actually, I argue, inhibit some of your actual potential power. I'm not saying you can't hit somebody hard and be angry, right? You can hit someone hard and be angry, but you can hit them harder if you were just being mean. My own journey with this was, it took me a while because I grew up, I wasn't ever in a street fight. I was in one street fight after I stopped boxing, and that was it. So I wasn't like scrapping and things like that. I sparred a couple times when I was a little kid, and that's it. And then I started boxing in my late teen years. So being a reasonably adjusted person, I wasn't okay with punching people in the face, and particularly punching people in the face hard and in the body hard, right? It didn't seem normal, right? I wasn't raised to do that. And so you might be in a similar situation where you haven't grown up just hitting people as hard as you can whenever you want to, and it's a little strange. And I see that happen all the time with people that I train, no matter what background they're from. You're taught since you're young, if you punch someone, punch them in the shoulder, right? Punch them somewhere where it's not gonna just like leave a big mark, that type of thing, right? But obviously boxing is an extreme sport and a very violent sport. And you have to be able to be okay with taking somebody out. And if you can do that, if you can overcome that within the confines of the sport, you will be a great fighter. Now, my journey with this was I would hit somebody, I would be able to hit someone hard, right? I got that pretty quickly, right, when I started. So I got over the thing of hitting people, right, or that being weird, super quick, because I was raised around boxing, so I was like, okay. And I did it a couple times, sparred a couple times when I was a kid. But what my problem was is I would hit them, and tell me if this is your problem, I would hit them hard. My favorite punch is the left hook. Boom! Hit them with my big left hook. It would rock them a little bit. They would feel it. I would know they felt it. But then I wouldn't do anything afterwards, right? Now, again, a good boxer needs to be a good finisher. So that's not hitting someone hard one time. Unless you're just really good, great with your placement and really great with your power, and that person's really great at getting knocked out, that might not do it. If they're a tough guy, one big shot might not do it. You got to put them together, and you got to be a good finisher. So I had to really work on that. And for me, where I finally hit that point where I would actually walk up to the door of knocking somebody out and then walk through the door of knocking somebody out was like right before I stopped boxing. I finally had the mental realization through doing things like visualization, things like that, also just boxing long enough where, and also something my dad would tell me is like, hey, that guy across the ring from you, he wants to take everything away from you. He wants to destroy all of your goals and dreams and put you in the hospital. So it's either you or him. And that's an important way to look at it, because that's the truth. In the context of a fight, that guy would be totally okay with knocking you the hell out. So you need to be aware of that and use that as energy to get him out of there, or at least to hurt him very badly. Now, I remember that moment when it all shifted for me, and that was when I was sparring this one guy that I would spar quite a bit. And same thing, I would hit him hard, but I wouldn't put any shots together. It'd be like one solid shot, that's it. Versus, again, a good fighter is someone that has control and things like that. But again, someone that's their equal, they can let a combination go. They can let their punches go in a fashion that is, it may actually just put the person down, and the person delivering it didn't even realize it was doing that, right? You didn't even think about it. It's like there was this one guy I worked with who was a two-time world professional Muay Thai champion, and he told me about how he would knock someone out, stop somebody, and someone would say, oh, you did such a great job with this thing and that thing that you did. And he's like, man, I don't even remember doing that. And it wasn't because he was in the cloud of war or, seeing red. it was because it was all just coming without thought because of the training, and then there's no brakes on the execution, right? We have all these brakes on ourselves when we're executing our punches, holding back, not fully executing what we're doing, and it limits what can happen. And obviously, like we all know with boxing, if you're thinking about what you're gonna do kind of before you do it, and especially if you're thinking too much before you do it, you're gonna hesitate, you're not gonna execute, and you're gonna be waiting all night, and you're gonna have a lot of trouble, all right? So anyway, I hit that point though, where I went to the bathroom, and in that little quiet moment by myself, I was like, man, I'm just gonna squash this guy like a bug. And the way I looked at it was like being a sniper. Sniper's not angry, and I used the analogy with sniping with jabs earlier, but this is how you can be a sniper in boxing, is that there's no emotion with the sniper, right? There's no emotion at all. You need to be cool, calculated, but that shot you're taking is deadly. It ends a life. And that's the most dramatic thing you can do as a human to another human. But they have to be okay with that, and they have to do it without emotion, right? Almost like being a psychopath. And I found that connection within the confines of the sport of boxing to get that place. Then when I got that place in that bathroom, I came out, first round. I just put a few punches together. It wasn't like I was like, I'm gonna knock this dude out. I just put a couple punches together, and he was on the ground. And I remember it was kind of funny because my dad told the other guy, hey, you know, Keith's been hitting pretty hard. So if something rocks you, take a knee. All that standard stuff with boxing, right? Something hurts you, take a knee. Get that little breather. It's sparring, right? And so I got this guy in the corner. Don't even quite remember at all what I threw, or couldn't even tell you right afterwards what I threw. It just all came together. The brakes came off, and he's on the ground. And my dad said to him, hey, why didn't you say something that you were hurt? And I interrupted the guy's response, and I was like, kind of said it annoyingly to my dad, but I was like, he didn't have time. He didn't have a chance, because it just all happened. It just happened, and I took the brakes off, all right? So that's the big thing with intention. Now, with intention, let's dive into some of the details on that. Punching through, right? So not to, but through. We all know that concept, all right? But you need to, and I'm going to talk about training ways to do that later, but you cannot just punch to that target. You got to punch through that target. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but that is just such a basic thing. And to be clear, what is punching through a target? It is turning the body and letting all the energy pass through it, not hitting the target and then trying to push through the target. As we all know, you want to snap your punches, things like that. And I have a great video talk about being loose and everything else and how to do that. But once you hit the target, it's not about like forcing it through like you're digging into the ground. It's, again, more like just taking off the brakes, right? Taking off all inhibitory factors and just going through that thing. And that's where it's similar to axing a tree. I've been chopping down a bunch of trees recently, and I've gotten the same groove and the same feel of you're just letting that thing go without a lot of effort, but you're just letting it go, and you're trying to go through it, not by muscling, for instance, an axe through a tree or muscling your punch through an opponent, but by just almost releasing it. Another thing as well is to disrespect your opponent in your own mind, right? Now, of course, if you're doing a big pro fight and things like that, nowadays it's very popular to disrespect people and things like that, and I don't think that's very cool. But that's my own weird old person opinion. Now, in your own mind, though, you need to disrespect the person. What do I mean by that? When we go into a sparring session or a fight with somebody, I've had guys that will go into a fight with someone, and that person that they're fighting, I know hits hard. But my guy doesn't know they hit hard. And I don't tell him. Because what I see happen sometimes is if you know somebody hits hard, you start automatically anticipating you getting hurt. And so everything is causing you to react more, and then it hurts your punch power. Why? Because you're throwing a punch and you're concerned while you're throwing it that he could be hitting you at the same time with something that's going to hurt you. And so you're going to, again, light up everything that's inhibitory in your body and hold back off that shot and not let it rip, right? And that's one way that you could say people like, for instance, Mike Tyson, or in modern context like Gervonta Davis, or even Deontay Wilder with his very poor technique. When someone hits you so hard, it can very easily make you second guess your punch as you're throwing it, and that's tension right there, and that's holding it back, all right? And that's gonna hurt your punching power. So in your mind, you need to bring the person down a couple steps. Again, I've seen guys I've had guys, and I've experienced this with myself, where you go against someone that's actually pretty good, but you don't know they're good, and you do better than you go against someone else that isn't as good as that other person, but you know that they're good, right? And when you thought this other guy was just green or whatever, or just not that experienced or not that good or couldn't hit that hard, you have a fine time. Then when you go against someone that you saw knock somebody out yesterday, you're like, damn, I'm concerned, right? Playing them down. Now, a couple things, like I had this one pro fighter that he was crazy tough, and I got his defense pretty good, but he was crazy tough. So he had the toughness, and then we worked to get the defense on there and the conditioning. But he had a good thing, and I'll steal it from him. And that's where he would call people a little B-I-T-C-H in his own head, right? And sometimes he would verbally say it under his breath. But, you know, you're throwing punches on him. He's like, is that all you got, you little, you know? And he's just, that's what he's saying. And because that's degrading you in his mind. And so therefore, it doesn't hurt as much. He's not worried about those punches. It's really crazy how psychologically you can end up taking punches better with these different thought processes versus, you know, just being so scared of it. And it's just, it's phenomenal, because that's where I see a guy that's in shape, that starts boxing, can take a certain level of power punch, right? Receive it. Then later, 3, 4, 5 years later, largely same level of conditioning, and it's a headshot. It's not like a stomach shot where it's like, oh, his stomach's more hard or whatever, right? The nerves are more dead. It's like, it's a headshot. And he can take a way harder shot. And again, I'm not trying to make him take it, but he can take a way harder shot because mentally there isn't that much fear and that much unknown about it. Or if you're going to be fearful of your guy, again, you got to find out what type of person you are. For some people, you need to degrade them in your own mind so that you can execute your punches hard and hurt them. Or for some people, that fear is energy, which is going to make them really, when they have a chance to throw, they're going to let it rip. And you might be a combination of these two things. It might be a circumstantial situation. One day it's one thing, another day it's another thing. I've seen that happen too. I know sometimes when I've been in the midst of someone throwing a bunch of punches and I need to shoot in between, if they're throwing kind of hard, sometimes in those instances, I'm like, man, I need to really dig this shot and throw it with all my max rotation I can and everything else, because if I'm going to take a chance, it's going to be damn worth it. Also, have a mantra for yourself, all right? And I'm going to get into the mechanics here in a second, but the whole approach here is important because, again, like I said earlier, we can have all the mechanics, but if your approach is not correct on increasing your power, it's not going to work so well, all right? If you're missing one of these things, it's going to make a difference when we go into the actual mechanics. All right, so have a mantra. I got a mantra for myself when I got to that point where I was able to just start taking people out of there, which was that it's a physical law that if I hit you hard enough and in the right places, you're going down, right? It's a physical law. I don't care who you are, you're mortal. You're a human being, you're not a god. And sometimes we can make people up to be gods in our own mind, or demigods, right? Where you're like, man, this guy, he looks scary, he looks in shape, he's got all those muscles, right? Whatever it is that's intimidating you, right? Or he's just got this look. Or you've seen him work before and you're like, man, that's dangerous. But remember, he's just a man. He's just a man, and maybe you can take him out, or maybe the next person, right? I had this one fighter, he fought a former world champion who was known as a power puncher. My guy, we lost a decision to this guy. Good fight, very competitive. And my guy had to battle through some of these things that I'm talking about with this guy that was a huge power puncher. Very next fight, that former world champion that's a big power puncher got knocked out, right? And I was like, man, see, to my guys, like, see, that could have been us. That could have been us, you know? We did great, we got through, we didn't get hurt, and, you know, it was a competitive fight. But, like, man, see, that could have been us. That guy was set up to be taken out. So remember that for your own self. That guy that looks like unbeatable or immortal, man, very next fight, someone else might take him out. So how about that be you? Again, don't be stupid trying to take him out, but you know what I'm talking about. If someone has a block head, you go for their body. That's the ticket to take him out, right? If somebody is just crazy strong downstairs, you might be able to hit them right upstairs, maybe with a more equilibrium shot or something like that, or just a cumulative effect of punches. Or they may be so darn tough that you almost can't physically take them out, but you take them out almost mentally, right? It's not necessarily that they're actually that concussed or that hurt, but they almost just quit from the punches because you've messed with them mentally so much, right? That's a whole other aspect, but this, again, it's a physical law, man. Everybody is beatable. I don't care who you are. Do not glorify people too much to say, oh, this one fighter is not able to be beat. Everybody has lost and is beatable. And that leads me to the last thing before we get into our specific techniques and mechanics, all right? Everyone has a code as well. That's another thing. So you're throwing that one shot, you're throwing two shots, and you hit him and you hit him. And you're like, man, he's not hurt. He's not having trouble. He's not reacting the way I want him to react. Well, that's just like you trying to call your friend or trying to punch a code on a door to get inside somewhere, and the code is 4-digit code, you're punching 2 of the digits. Boom, boom. Why didn't it work? Let me do another 2-digit. Boom, boom. Why didn't it work? Well, you don't even have the right numbers to throw, right? And to punch in to break the code, because everyone has a code to be broken or a code that breaks them. But you're stopping short of completing the whole code, right? You're not going to get success if you don't punch in that whole code. So remember that. It might not be one shot that is the code to break them. It might not be 2 shots. Sometimes it might not be 3. It might be 4 shots, and those cumulative punches together in the right fashion, depending on what that opponent is doing, is going to be the code to take them out. All right? So that's just a very powerful way to look at it that you need to remember. When we become power punchers, or when we become harder punchers, it's easy to be one-shot guy, right? But if we can put them together and put them together in the right way, it doesn't matter how tough someone is, we can break them. All right, now let's go into all the mechanic stuff. Let's talk first about accuracy and timing. So first with the accuracy, we need to hit the valuable areas, right? Because you can be hitting decently hard, but if you do not hit valuable areas, it won't have the same effect. I was watching this with a fight last night, where it was a live fight where one guy was throwing pretty good hard punches at the other guy, but they weren't clean punches. They were hitting foreheads and things like that. They weren't hitting the valuable areas that are going to make a difference. It's like, man, I can hit you all day long in the arm, and yeah, I could tire out your arm over enough rounds and all this other stuff, yes, but that's not going to take them out, right? But that same shot, if I can line it up right, etc., on the tip of the chin with the same amount of force that I hit his arm with, or I hit his forehead, is going to take him out. It's like, classic example of this is when George Foreman won the heavyweight title as an old man, knocking out Michael Moore. I remember Foreman talking about in an interview after that fight that he shot the 1-2, and you can see in the film the 1-2. He does it a couple times. The 1-2, boom, is a little high. The 2's high on the forehead. He's like, okay, I just need to drop it down a little bit. Boom. And so he 1-2, puts the 2 on the tip of the chin. Bam! Night-night for Michael Moore. And of course, it was Michael Moore's fault for standing there, letting him set all this stuff up. But this applies to you as a puncher. You might be George Foreman with the first 1-2. You hit boom, boom. I'm not a power puncher. Guy doesn't, I can't hit hard, right? Or I'm not hitting, my punches aren't having the effect I want them to have. At better accuracy, same exact punch takes him out. All right, so it's just such a powerful truth, and I want you to make sure that you understand this. All right, and remember too, you can hit somebody on the left side of their body with your right hook, but if you hit him on the right side with your left hook, with the same amount of power in the right area, that's where that liver is, man. It's going to cause more effect, right? Now, if you hit him in the sternum with a shot that you hit him hard with, maybe a little bit high or below, or even the stomach, and he was tight, but you hit him a little bit higher, it has more of effect. Right? Like I'm saying, tip of the chin has more effect. You know, the temple, things like that, versus the forehead. Okay? So you must understand these concepts, that part of being a powerful puncher is not only your ability to generate force, but to do it accurately. And then that leads me to the next point, which is the timing of it, right? And it's one way, like Teddy Atlas says, is having a delivery mechanism. So if you can't, you know, you can have a nuclear bomb, but if you don't have the missile or the airplane to take it there and drop it, what you gonna do? You might as well not have it, right? And so that goes to obviously the techniques to deliver it, but I'm not gonna go into that too much. But the timing is another thing, right? Because most great knockouts are actually counters, right? It's someone throwing while someone else is throwing, which is why it catches them off guard and also so cleanly. You have the one and, all right? Because someone's throwing punches, it's typically a 1, 2, 1, 2 type rhythm. Now, while that rhythm's going, you need to make sure your counters don't fall into their timing, all right? Because there's a concept in boxing called lulling somebody into your timing or into a slower timing. And you see this all the time, especially with newer guys. Two new guys will be sparring each other or fighting each other, either one. And they're both throwing punches on the same time signature, in the same time rhythm, right, rather. And so it's just boom, 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 other guy, boom, boom, boom. It's all the same exact time. And no one's splitting that timing in half or changing it at all, all right? And they don't land as much. It's harder to land. It's also more dangerous. But if you can find that timing of not 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, right in between those punches, that's when someone's the most open. They're not prepared for it. If it's a body shot, the air is moving through. There's no tension, and wow, a shot that is kind of not that powerful can really hurt someone and drop them. And same thing goes with a headshot, though, because they don't expect it. And the punch you don't see is the punch that hurts, right? We all know that adage. And that's how you make it work. And also, too, if someone's just doing one shot, if they shoot one shot and you counter not on the halftime, but on the full time, then, man, you have the danger of running into their next shot, right? So if someone goes 1, 2, right, or boom, boom, and you, let's say, slip the 1 to counter back with your 2. If your timing on that is the punch is 1, 2, boom, boom, and you go boom, boom, you might just run into the right hand as you shoot your right hand. But if you can ba-bow, get that half timing, ba-bow, right off of it, hopefully that right hand can hit their face as their right hand is starting to go out, and that's when the best things happen. So that's accuracy and timing. Let's go on to turning over the knuckles, all right? I'm taking this phrase from Roy Jones because I had the opportunity to be in a dressing room next to him on some pro fights last summer, and he started working with this guy that was on the amateur boxing circuit in Georgia for a long time. And this guy is super slick boxer. Super slick boxer, good boxer, and is not a power puff puncher. But his punches are not the hardest punches they could be. He's not one of those guys that you're just like, that guy's dangerous, right? Now, when you go in to be a pro, which is what this guy's doing, this guy's been a professional boxer for a while. When you go to be a pro and you don't have power, you're going to have more trouble, right? Because if you got some power and you got 8 rounds, 10 rounds, 12 rounds in a championship fight to execute that power, you always have something in the bag that can help you win, right? But if you don't have that power and it's, let's say, round even 7 or 8, and you haven't won any rounds yet, your corner might just need to stop the fight. Because if you don't have any power, right, and we all know boxers that are like this, and world champions that are like this, right? So it's not like, oh, you don't have power, you can't be a world champion. But it's just a danger if you don't develop power. But if you're up or if you're down in the fight, and let's say you haven't won a round yet, and we just finished out round 7, and you don't have a chance of knocking the guy out, I mean, it's basically done. But if you have a chance of knocking the guy out, you always have that chance to get it back. Now, just to go deep into some thoughts here, think about how that could also be more dangerous for a fighter, just kind of talking to coaches here, is if someone does have that power to have a one-hitter quitter, then it can actually lead them sometimes to be to hang in a fight too long, right? So think about guys again like Deontay Wilder. If you're cornering him, obviously it's like, I wonder how much he listens. But if he's in round 9 and getting beat up, it's like you might have that thought in the back of your mind where you're like, well, he does have a lot of power. If he can just land one punch, he can get that guy out of there. And so therefore that guy can take more damage to their body, which is a horrible thing, because we're all human beings. Fighters are human beings. And they can take more damage than is necessary that would have been stopped on someone that didn't have quite as much power. and it can be not good for the human being. All right, so that's one thing. But just remember though, if you're deep in a fight and you don't have the ability to hurt the guy, that's a big trouble, man. So you got to have that ability to hurt the guy. So anyway, so this guy, you know, like I said, pro fighter. Roy is working with him along with a few other guys, and Roy, I was asking him, like, you know, what's he working on with this guy, and he was telling me he's working on turning over the knuckles, right? Which means on those straight shots, making sure, and all shots, making sure we're connecting with the knuckles. You'll be shocked how much you, maybe, probably, or people you work with, or people in your gym or whatever, are throwing punches and they're kind of connecting fingers, right? It's just connecting low enough on the hand that it's more fingers versus on the knuckles, right? And I'm not talking about like the big knuckle and all that stuff, because we're in a glove. We're in a glove. It's not, I just really don't believe, and I haven't personally noticed when someone focuses punching on their big knuckle versus just the middle, because a glove is a flat surface. It's pretty hard to delineate between the big knuckles and the small knuckles. It's hitting with the flush of the glove, but hitting with the knuckle part of the glove. So many times guys will shoot a jab and they'll kind of paw. That's a paw, hitting with the fingers. Or they'll shoot a right hand and they'll paw. And I see guys do this on mitts all the time and on backs all the time. And the shots are a little bit of a paw. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that those punches can't do some damage and not feel good. I'm not going to say it's like getting, you know, touched with a pillow or something. But it's not going to have the same effect as if you get that turnover and get those knuckles hitting, all right? Now, one way you can do this is almost kind of focus on arcing the punch down and shoulder snapping, all right? So shoulder snapping naturally kind of pops everything up. Now make sure the shoulder doesn't pop up before the punch goes or as the punch is going. It's right at the end. You pop up that shoulder and that helps turn that shot over so you hit with the knuckles, but then also almost shooting down just a little bit. Just a little bit. I'm talking fine nuances here. I'm not saying literally try to throw a punch that's just like an overhand downward shot for all your straight shots. But just that little arc down can help you get those knuckles, all right? And now talking about it with the hooks though. So with the hooks, it's not necessarily about turning over the knuckles, it's about turning it in, all right? So my father taught a lot about the flexion of the wrist with those hooks, because when you throw a long hook and you have a straight wrist like that, it's going to connect with fingers, right? And it can still do something, right? If I whip my whole body weight on this, it can do something. I can open my hand and slap someone super hard and hurt them because of the force of my weight and the rotation, right? But if we can get the knuckles, the hardness, right? And everything else built up with that wrap in the glove that, like I talked about last video, a couple of videos ago, about it makes it such a hard, compact force in there, particularly when you're pro, that is gonna hurt somebody a lot. Now, getting that palm facing you, right? So think about that with your hooks and uppercuts, palm facing you as you're doing them, right? If that palm isn't facing you and it's not a super, super short hook, like literally this short, like right in front of your face, because think about it, someone's head's here, that's like the side of their jaw right there, and they're almost like in space, just like be pressing their face on me. But if there's any length on that, get that little bit of like that, boom. And you can watch guys do this in slow motion, right? One guy that comes to mind might not be the best person to mention, but he was very good at one time. Adrian Broner. You watch Adrian Broner, some of his combinations in slow motion, you see him like this as the hook comes, and it turn in, almost like whip in, so it's connecting with those knuckles. Practice flexing in with those hooks like this, and practice making sure we're popping the shoulder and the arm and the knuckles over with our straight punches, because that right there is just going to automatically make your punches harder. I did this with someone recently. One of our fighters got about 20 or so fights. He started really working on making sure those shots were knuckles, and that made a big difference alone, all right? So that could be a big thing that you're missing. Now let's talk about pivoting, all right? So pivoting just to pivot, right? And when I say pivoting, sometimes people think you mean movement, right? Like turning or spinning, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about pivoting on your punches. Pivoting just to pivot is garbage, all right? Now, I know what everyone's saying that's trained with me or is a coach under us or whatever, or that, you know, has worked with a lot of coaches. What the hell are you talking about, right? Pivoting's essential for punches. Well, if you just pivot to pivot, kind of like what I talk about with like doing everything mechanically correctly and not have the right intention. But if you just pivot to pivot, it's not going to be enough. It's not actually going to make a difference, and it actually can hurt you. How's this? Well, what is the function of pivoting on your foot with a punch, right? Pivoting on the ball of your foot on a punch, like a baseball player does, or like a golfer turns on that foot and goes up on the toe. What's the purpose of that? The purpose is not some magical thing of that pivot creates a chain of power that runs up the body and then comes out at the end of your fist. That's kind of crap, in my opinion, all right? And you can disagree with me. Comment below if you do, and that's fine. And we can have a great conversation about it. But what it is the pivot is a release on the hip, all right? Try and experiment with me real quick, all right? Plant your feet, face one way, all right? And point both toes that way. Now, turn to the side. Kind of like you're boxing somebody, you can take your lead foot and point it forward a little bit, right? But the main point is that your rear leg, your right leg if you're orthodox, is pointing off to this side, all right? Now, turn your hip as much as you can without pivoting the foot while keeping the foot flat on the ground. Do you feel the stress on your knee? Do you feel the kind of shutdown on the hip rotation? That's the purpose of a pivot. The purpose of a pivot is to allow the hip to turn and to take a little pressure off the knee, all right? But we can turn our hips all day as we punch, but you're punching with your arms and fists and upper body. So you could turn your hips all day and be doing kind of a cute little dance, and turn the feet all day and doing a cute little dance with the feet. But if you're not rotating the upper body maximally, and of course mechanically squeezing at the end of the punch and things like that, throwing loosely but snapping, you're not gonna. It means nothing. It means nothing, and that's where you can see plenty of fighters. The list is long, very long, of fighters that are massively powerful that don't quote unquote pivot. But what are the key mechanics they have correct? They snap at the end of the punch. All right, they rotate their shoulders with the punches and have some hip, perhaps. But the big thing is they rotate the shoulders as they throw like a 2 and a 3 and hooks and things like that. That's the key. That's the key. So that's where I'm saying pivoting just to pivot is garbage. I had one fighter. They went to nationals quite a few times, did very well, but they had a huge trouble. They were pivoting just to pivot. And I have to admit, I missed it. I missed it. There was a long time where they were just pivoting, and the foot was raising up, but there was no hip and there was no shoulder rotation on those pivoting punches. It was very minimal, to the point where they didn't need to pivot. So it's like, if you're going to throw with that minimal rotation, don't pivot. There's no need for it. But if you're going to throw with maximal rotation, a pivot's going to be helpful. It's going to help unlock that, right? And also keep you on balance, all right? So just a big thing is just remember, pivoting just to pivot without the actual rotation and max rotation that it's helping facilitate is going to be pointless, and it's actually going to slow you down. Because think about it. You're going up on the ball with one foot, ball up on another foot. It's going to slow you down a little bit for no harder punch, so therefore kind of ridiculous, right? And then also sometimes people go up on the toe, and that's definitely not good, especially if you're just pivoting to pivot versus pivoting to release the hip to rotate, right? But you're going up on that toe. What does that mean automatically? Automatically, you're taking weight off that foot. Now you're on one foot, basically, all right? Whenever you go up on a toe, try to stand up on your toes. Not on the balls of your feet, on your toes. Yes. Unless you're a ballerina and you have ballerina shoes, it ain't going to work so well, all right? So making sure when you pivot, number one, you pivot on the balls of the feet. But number two, making sure you're actually pivoting for a reason, which is to add that little extra to your rotation to make max power versus just pivoting to pivot, right? All right. Now, why is it good? Like I said, it opens up the hip, allows the hip to release. It's like a key, right? And you're unlocking the rotation. That's why you pivot, all right? But if you're not rotating, don't pivot. All right? But so when we do pivot, we have to make sure that we're getting maximum rotation. And look at the hardest punchers in boxing. One person that comes to mind is Rocky Marciano. He was a very small heavyweight, and yes, with almost every champion besides a couple, or almost every heavyweight champion besides a couple, you can make the argument that they didn't have good competition. And I can definitely make that argument for Rocky Marciano, all right? Don't hate me if you love Rocky Marciano. I love him too. And don't hate on me for mentioning Rocky Marciano, because I also am going to mention some of the nuances. And to be clear, everyone that's a legend has little things that you can pick out that you can, bring them back down to earth. But it doesn't mean that they weren't great fighters and things like that. All right, but Rocky Marciano fought when? He fought right after World War II, when a lot of guys were killed, and there just wasn't, the competition wasn't that deep in the heavyweight division. That's why he could be 188 pounds and win the heavyweight title. Now, also though, he could be 188 pounds or 89 pounds and win the heavyweight title. Also because he maximally rotated with his punches. Now, were his pivots perfect? No. Sometimes he'd go up on the toe. Yes, absolutely. But watch how he rotates the body. And if you want to increase your punching power, rotate like Marciano. That's maximal rotation. He's not throwing for speed. He's not, throwing for any of those things. He's not even quite throwing for accuracy, really. He's more of a clubber. But, man, that rotation. Throw with your shoulders is one way that I tell my guys. Because, like, if you're on the inside, you're trying to throw hard punches, focus on throwing with your shoulders, almost like you're trying to hit them with your shoulders versus your arms. And then the arms are secondary. And that means the body is actually with the punch. Versus if you lead with the arms, the body's not with the punch. And you're not going to have as much power. Or you're not going to have much power at all. All right? Those are called arm punches. And then, before I jump into our training tools, let's talk about the very last thing, right? Because we can do all this other stuff, right? Hit with the knuckles. You can have the right intention and everything else. And pivoting, accuracy, timing, hitting the right areas. But if you don't have that loose, snap, brain-bouncing punch, it's not going to bounce the brain. It's not going to cause the concussion we want to cause. And drop them. So make sure you got that snap, like I talked about in two videos ago or whatever, about how to be loose and snappy, being loose and snappy with that punch, snapping, and that's going to bounce that brain in that skull. And when that brain hits the side of the skull, that's going to cause the lights to go out or for them to feel discombobulated, and boom, you hit someone on the tip of the chin, especially with that snap. It doesn't have to even be that hard, right? I can think of so many. It's like the phantom punch from Ali against Sonny Liston. Look at that. That was just a snap. He didn't rotate. He didn't do all this stuff I'm talking about. There was like a little shoulder rotation maybe, but he turned it over, hit with the knuckles, and he had that beautiful snap, which of course, as we know, Ali was so loose, and that's why that happened. Or to think in a non-boxing context, think about Anderson Silva when he knocked out Forrest Griffin. Forrest Griffin's from Athens, Georgia. He trained in my backyard with my father. And Forrest was just coming for it all crazy, and Anderson just kind of stepped back, leaned back, and boom. And Forrest was coming into it, but then also there was that snap. Again, it was a classic, more modern example. Of course, as years go by, I guess it becomes a old school example now. Let's talk about our training tools. You guessed it, number one training tool to make yourself a power puncher is going to be shadow boxing. All right? Why? All right? Because obviously we work on our technique. Right? Now, the biggest thing with shadow boxing, that is the best thing about shadow boxing, is that outside of punching is obviously you can move. So a bag is limited on how much it moves. A mid holder, you have to move according to the mid holder, all right? But with shadow boxing, you get to literally recreate all your stuff with movement, all right? So that's like one of the main things in shadow boxing that makes it superior to everything else. But the second thing that makes it superior to everything, every other type of training besides actually sparring, is in shadow boxing, you automatically, if you're doing it right, follow through with your punches. You're not stopping your punches. I notice that people that hit the bag all the time, or hit mitts all the time even, they tend to not follow through with their punches. They'll stop it. And, don't be wrong, I notice people shadow box and don't follow through with their punches as well, just as bad. But hopefully when you shadow box, you are following through with your punches. And I know what you might be saying, oh man, you're twisting too much. Watch any fight. Watch any fight, any pro fight, any good fighter that misses a big punch. They do so with a big rotation. They're on balance, and yes, they're overcommitted, but they're actually not, because they're not losing balance. Now, if you're losing balance, then I could argue that is overcommitting. But you gotta turn through. You gotta punch through, and shadow boxing will help you do that. So work on that, because your muscles probably are not trained to throw max velocity here and actually keep your balance, right? Because if I had you hit a bag as hard as you can and then I snatch that bag away from you, you might lose balance. Or if that opponent snatches away from you, you might lose balance, and now you're more vulnerable. Versus building up a perfect balanced base that allows you to completely release. Because also, too, this will inhibit you. If you're not sure of your balance when you miss, you'll also hold back on your punch. Does that make sense? When you're not sure of your balance, then you'll throw a little, just a slight more, with slight more hesitation, and then that's going to equal less powerful punches. All right. But if you're sure of your balance, and you're sure of your balance when you miss a powerful punch, yes, it's tiring. Yes, it takes energy to miss a punch, but you're going to throw that punch as hard as you can. All right. And then also, when you shadow box vigorously and with hard punches, rotating, and again, snapping, not muscling, but rotating hard, then you're actually going to increase conditioning in all the areas that you need to in order to miss punches. So therefore, when you do fight and you do miss punches, it's not going to tire you out so much because you're used to it. And lastly, though, too, man, just to talk about it, is that when you're missing punches, now you're building up muscles in your back that's going to help support everything, help keep you safe. Because I've seen guys that miss a punch and actually hurt themselves. And those guys are not shadowboxing in the fashion I'm talking about. And now the one way, though, that shadowboxing is not going to get you to the powerful punch place, right? So again, most important tool, let's talk now to the next one. It's not going to give you the feedback of what the force is. So again, it's not going to let you know what your intention is, right? If I'm hitting a bag or a mitt or a person, I can kind of tell by maybe the sound of it, how it feels, right? Things like that, or how the bag buckles, how much force is there. If I'm throwing in the air like that, it's a harder thing to gauge. It's hard to gauge if you're actually squeezing tight when you're hitting, because it's very easy. You might not even be trying to be lazy as you shadow box, but it's very easy to shadow box and just keep the hands open the whole time like this, or even just slightly open, or just not squeezing in a fashion that when you would hit, it would actually be a hard shot and protect your knuckles and your hand, but also to hit hard. But that's where that bag keeps you honest in that sense of making sure you're squeezing tight, right? Which is why people say it's good for power. Yes, I mean, you got to squeeze tight when you hit it, right? It's easy to shadow box and not squeeze tight, and I don't care how much you rotate. If you don't build up the habit of squeezing tight when you hit, then that rotation is going to bite you in the butt when you go to actually hit somebody because you're not squeezing tight. Now let's talk about how we can also work on following through. Because again, like I mentioned, I can notice the bag can make people actually not follow through because the bag stops them versus when you practice following through, then it actually allows you to hit a person or a bag even harder. And that is missing mitts and missing bags. So plenty of times, if I'm holding mitts for you, let's say, and I say 2, 3, 2, bop, 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 I'm not going to let you hit every one of those shots sometimes because I want to make sure your balance is good. I want to make sure you're rotating through, and I can tell, for instance, with a hook and a right hand, but a hook's an easy way to show it, is if I say 2, 3, 2, boom, make you miss the hook, I can see you stopping yourself short on your rotation. I see that you go 2, good rotation, most people do, and then you go here and you stop right there with the hook, so you're literally not going through, you're right back to where your stance is, which is being side up. So you just went 2 and came back to position. You didn't go 2, 3 and turn things through. And you can see that when you make people miss, and also make sure that people are on balance, and it also helps them get the feel of what throwing an actual hard punch in the air is and to miss that hard punch, all right? And then the same thing that I said with the bag. You can hold it and snatch it away as the big shot's coming, and again, that's where someone can get the feel for what is actually missing a big shot and actually making sure they're on balance, and now they can match that with their shadow boxing. Now, talking about accuracy, how can we become more accurate? Well, sparring is going to be your #1 way to become more accurate, all right? But that's something hopefully you're doing if you want to be a better boxer and you're really focused on that part. What are some things outside of sparring we can do? Accuracy with the mitts and accuracy with the bags, all right? Because what can happen is if you are always hitting the bag is a fat thing and you're not really sure, you know, you have like this much of space to hit it where like things like the tip of the chin is, you know, it's like an inch, you know? So put a strip of tape on the bag. Aim for that strip of tape with the knuckles, right? On the mitts, having those smaller mitts help accuracy. Guys that hit mitts a lot and hit like right in that center point of the mitt tend to have more accuracy. I would hit mitts a lot when I trained, and people gave me feedback when I would spar them, like, man, damn, you're really accurate. Because literally, I was the only person like that was training at that time, so he would just hold mitts for me all the time, and my accuracy was pretty good. I'd hit right at those areas where you need to be hitting, versus someone that's just hitting a bag and not really thinking about where they're aiming, all right? Now, a bag that you can use in the gym for better accuracy, you can use a speed bag for that purpose, and not for dekada or dekada, either one of those. just for single shots. Boom, getting it right. And also it helps with the knuckle turnover too, and hit with those, and with the hooks and things like that, because now you got something that's about the size of a head, and the size of the target areas are gonna be hitting, and you get the feel for hitting it super hard and right on point. Now, the downside is it can train you for like a single hard shot, right? So that's the downside, but the upside is it can help you with that accuracy. Now, also too, by the way, mitt work as well, when done right, and also you as a boxer, you gotta make sure you do it right, meaning you're not pushing your punches so hard on the mitt holder that you're wrecking their shoulders and everything, and elbows. But hitting mitts, I found, can help encourage you just to rotate more anyway, because it's not such a hard surface that is solid that's going to stop you from going through. So it really helps you kind of bridge the gap between your shadow boxing and your bag work. Let's talk about strength training. Now, most important thing is being loose, all right? So you can be doing a ton of strength training, and if you're not loose, it's not going to translate. But strength training is important. It does have an effect. It helps you create more force, and that's going to be important for another concept of training I'm going to talk about in a second. What type of strength training should you do? Should you do curls for your uppercuts? No. Should you do pecs, like flies, for your hooks? No, because that's not, you don't hook like that. You don't do a fly as you hook. Your arm just kind of follows your body as you rotate. But you want to build up general strength, doing things like a press of some type, maybe like an incline press or a military press. What's great about military press is it works all three heads of the shoulder, and that's awesome, that's great. And if you're standing, that's good, that's athletic. It's a multi-joint movement, which all of your strength training needs to probably be multi-joint movement. What do I mean by that? It means more than one joint's moving, right? So yeah, 2 joints or more are moving. So for instance, if I do a press of some type, I have my shoulder joint and my elbow joint moving. If I do a squat, I have my hip joint and my knee joint moving and my ankle joint. So multi-joint movements. So some type of press, some type of pull, emphasizing on the pull, and emphasizing on heavy pulls, whether it's a pull up, pull down of some type, or a row. Then also some type of squat or deadlift, and you got it all wrapped in the bag, because we're trying to be a good athlete that can use multi muscle groups and joints together at one time. We're not worried about maximal bicep development and maximal delt development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the goal. The goal is not maximal hypertrophy. The goal is to actually be strong. With sets and reps, I'm not going to get into that. You can find a better resource for that. I have my own thoughts and opinions on that, but just do what is normal, okay? Now, that's going to become important, though, for when I talk about now this other part of training, which too many people oftentimes jump into without the proper prerequisite. Plyometrics and explosive work, all right? Now, what is plyometrics? Plyometrics simply means exploiting the stretch reflex. What's the stretch reflex? Stretch reflex is where if I grab your arm and try to yank your arm from you while you're relaxed, there is just naturally within your nervous system, your fibers are going to light up reflexively. It's called a stretch reflex to prevent the joint from getting damaged. So if I'm like this and someone yanks my arm, there's going to be a natural contraction that happens because of my nervous system. It's called the stretch reflex to prevent that hyperextension from happening, all right, that injury. Now, you can exploit that stretch reflex by doing the stretch in a dynamic fashion to load it to create more power, all right? What do I mean by that? One way is, let's say, to jump off of a surface, land, and as you land, use that stretch of that land to spring back up and create actually more force on the explosive part of the movement, the jump part, all right? That's one way to do it. Another way with like the upper body is either a snap push-up, where it's just that load and explosion and a clap, things like that, or you have 2 chairs and you drop down, boom, explode back up, things like that, where you're reversing the movement very quickly to maximize the stretch reflex to actually create more force, all right? But you need a strength base in order to do that, all right? So it's important. Build that strength base, then go into explosive work. Too often people don't have much of a strength base, they go into explosive work, and then they don't get as much out of their explosive work. You get some strength out of that, I find, from my experience, but also the joints and everything else aren't quite as strong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? Now, also just explosive work in general. So that just means simply you're doing things with maximal intent or maximal speed, right? So you're not worried about the weight that you're lifting, but you're worried about doing it as fast as you can, right? Or as explosively as you can, all right? So it's a moderate weight with maximum speed. Now, examples of exercises like this, I gave you some examples on plyometrics, but examples of exercises with the explosiveness is like medicine ball throw, right? Where I have that medicine ball, and it's not a plyometric because I'm not going to load it back up and stretch it and shoot it. You could experiment with that as well. But just right from there, I'm going to rotate hard like it's a right hand and twist hard and throw it as hard as I can. So you have that concept. You have simple concepts like sprinting is a basic explosive one. And don't undervalue things that are basic like sprinting. Sprinting is great because not only does it just really get your legs being explosive, but also, believe it or not, this arm pump that you do when you sprint hard, I find personally that that also helps with hand explosiveness or arm explosiveness as well, okay? Right, and then you have also rotational exercises as well, whether it's like some type of Russian twist or you have it against a wall, but the key is to do explosively. Now, the key is as well though, if you're doing this to actually increase punching power, it's not just part of a general circuit of conditioning, is to make sure that you operate it like it is explosive work. Your plyometrics or your explosive work, it should not also serve as conditioning, because then it's actually not going to make you more explosive. All right, does that make sense? So you need to make sure every set you do of the plyometric or every set you do of the explosive work is actually maximum explosion, so therefore also you have maximal rest in between. If you're a strength athlete and you're lifting heavy, you don't need to lift heavy and then 30 seconds later jump back onto that heavy lift and fall apart because your body didn't have enough rest to actually lift that weight. Same thing goes with your explosive training. The explosive training, you should be emphasizing the performance of the movement and the speed and explosiveness of that versus the conditioning effect. So just give you a real world example. If I'm doing, let's say, snap push-ups, right? I do a set of like 5 or 10, right? Because you don't want to go to fatigue where you're getting diminished returns now. You want to make sure you can get it right in that kind of sweet spot of maximum explosion and performance, and then before that tapers off, you stop it. So let's say it's like 5 to 10 depending on your strength. Boom. Take a rest. Take a minute rest, 2-minute rest. So you're fully fresh to do it again full, because you're training your nervous system, you're training your fibers in your muscle to explode with force in a short amount of time. And if it's not exploding with force in the shortest amount of time that you can, it's not actually training that. Then, last thing for your training is getting that grip right. All right, so the best thing that I found for it personally, and also for wrist strength too, is towel pull-ups. Why towel pull-ups? I know I have a weird thing about towel pull-ups, but I find it to be so great. I think why it's so great, why it transfers so much to boxing, is because when you grab a towel, and don't grab the big bulk of the towel even. Grab so you actually have, if you're a boxer and you're doing it for boxing, you actually just get the fabric of the towel. So now you're like how you're grabbing a glove, and you do your pull-ups with it. Or if you're not even ready for that, just hang. But you have that, and that will help to strengthen your muscles in your forearms in the exact place that it needs to be when you hit someone hard and you need to lock very tight. And guys have theories about why people that work day laboring jobs tend to hit harder. There's theories about the back muscles and traps and things like that that I've heard. But I think one of the biggest things is the grip. Their grip, think about it, they're gripping stuff, heavy stuff all day. They're not just lifting dumbbells and stuff like that. They're gripping odd objects and having to get things tight and work those forearms and work their grip. And that's gonna facilitate that hard punch, because right when they hit, everything turns into a rock, and that is gonna hurt you a lot, all right? I hope you enjoyed this video. Now make sure, don't just take this information and listen to it. Understand it, take notes, make a plan for yourself. And remember, any plan you make, don't get too crazy about it. Any plan you make is better than no plan at all, all right? Make a plan and then execute the plan over at least a month, and you'll notice a big difference. And if you execute over a few months, huge difference as well, all right, guys? Please, any comments, questions, comment below. Make sure you make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate all the awesome support that I've gained over the last month or so, and share it with someone that you think could benefit, and look out for the next video, guys.